Most people grow up believing that life follows a predictable path. You meet someone, fall in love, settle down, and build a future together. It's the story we hear in movies, the ending in every fairy tale, the expectation handed to us since childhood. But today, something very different is happening. More people than ever are choosing to stay single. Not because they can't find love, not because they're unlucky, and not because they've given up. They stay single because they want to. They choose it. And psychology actually has a name for this group: the voluntary single. These are people who aren't waiting for the right one to appear. They aren't desperately searching for companionship. They aren't filling out their lives with temporary partners to avoid loneliness. Instead, they live intentionally, clearly, with a deep understanding of who they are and what they need. And their reasons are far more profound than most people realize. If you've ever wondered why some people feel calmer, happier, or even stronger when they're single, or if you secretly feel that singleness suits you more than a relationship ever has, then this next part may finally make everything make sense. Some people choose to stay single because they've learned, through experience, that peace is more valuable than company. They may have been in relationships before. Some might have even been good ones. But even good relationships require emotional energy, constant communication, navigating moods, negotiating needs, compromising plans, managing expectations. For a lot of individuals, especially those who are sensitive, introspective, or highly independent, this emotional labor becomes exhausting. Not because the person they were with was bad, but because the relationship took more energy than it gave. Over time, they learned something powerful. Their peace, their quiet, their stability were worth protecting. These people aren't afraid of intimacy. They aren't avoiding love. They're simply choosing a life that doesn't drain them, a life where they can breathe, a life where their mind is calm. For them, being single isn't loneliness, it's freedom. And once they taste that freedom, it is very hard to give up. Others remain single because they have a strong sense of identity, a sense of who they are that they don't want to blur or sacrifice. Many people enter relationships hoping the other person will complete them, repair them, or define them. But voluntary singles don't think that way. They already know themselves. They've built a life they enjoy, hobbies, routines, beliefs, passions, and they don't feel the need to merge their identity with someone else before they're truly ready. They would rather maintain their independence than shrink themselves to fit into a relationship that interrupts their growth. To them, being single isn't a waiting room. It's a grounding space. They feel whole exactly as they are. Another reason people choose to stay single is because they are deeply invested in their personal purpose. These are people who feel called to something, maybe a career, a business, a creative pursuit, a dream they've carried for years. They understand that meaningful relationships require time, emotional effort, and attention. And they're honest enough to admit that right now, their energy is elsewhere. They don't want to enter a relationship half-heartedly. They don't want to offer someone their leftovers, the small fragments of energy that remain after chasing goals. Instead, they prioritize their mission. They build themselves. They shape their future. And they decide that when love finally arrives, if it does, it should enhance the life they're building, not interrupt it. People often mistake them for emotionally unavailable, but the truth is the opposite. They care too much to offer love when they're not in a place to give it fully. Some people choose singlehood simply because they refuse to settle. They've seen what settling looks like: the slow decay of affection, the quiet resentment, the arguments that repeat endlessly because the connection was never right to begin with. They've done the inner work. They know exactly what they need to feel respected, seen, and emotionally safe. So instead of entering relationships out of boredom, fear, or pressure, they wait. Not because they're picky, but because they know that choosing the wrong person is far more painful than choosing solitude. They take dating seriously, not casually. Settling for half-love or emotional crumbs doesn't interest them anymore. They choose quality over companionship. Others stay single because they've healed from emotional wounds, and that healing changed them. These individuals may have experienced heartbreak, betrayal, manipulation, or relationships that eroded their self-worth. But instead of rushing into something new, they stepped back. They chose themselves. They went inward. Healing requires isolation sometimes, time to understand what happened, to rebuild confidence, to relearn self-love. During that process, something powerful happens. The person discovers their own strength. They discover that they don't need a relationship to feel valued or complete. And because they healed, they now move slowly and intentionally. They won't accept toxicity disguised as passion or inconsistency disguised as chemistry. They would rather wait for a connection that feels safe, calm, and secure, something that honors the healing they worked so hard for. Their singlehood isn't a wound, it's a boundary. And perhaps the most misunderstood truth of all, voluntary singles aren't anti-love. They're not cynical, they're not hopeless, they're not cold. They still believe in deep connection, shared laughter, intellectual chemistry, emotional intimacy, but they're simply not desperate for it. They don't need a relationship to feel fulfilled. If love arrives and aligns with their standards, their peace, and their lifestyle, they'll welcome it. But if not, they'll continue living a full, meaningful life on their own terms. This mindset scares a lot of people because society often teaches us that being single means something is missing. But voluntary singles prove the opposite, that you can be happy, whole, secure, and deeply grounded all on your own. They show that love is not the only path to fulfillment. And in many cases, those who are single by choice end up experiencing the healthiest relationships later in life because they enter them with clarity, not fear, with confidence, not insecurity, with intention, not desperation. Being single by choice doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're behind. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. In fact, choosing singlehood requires more emotional strength than blindly following society's expectations. It means you understand yourself deeply enough to know what you can and cannot accept. It means you have self-awareness. It means you have self-respect. It means you have clarity about the life you want, and you refuse to compromise that clarity for temporary comfort. People who choose singleness aren't running from love. They're running towards alignment, towards peace, towards purpose, towards a life that feels true. And here's the final truth. When you become comfortable being single, you stop choosing relationships out of emptiness and start choosing them out of abundance. You stop chasing validation and start seeking connection. You stop asking, "What if I end up alone?" and start asking, "What if I end up with someone who isn't right for me?" Singleness gives you space to grow, to heal, to redefine yourself, to rise into the person you were meant to be. And from that place of strength, love, if you choose it, becomes something entirely different. Not a rescue, not a distraction, not a cure, but a choice. So, if you are single by choice, remember this. You are not incomplete. You are not delaying your life. You are not missing out. You are simply choosing the path that aligns with your soul. And that is something very few people have the courage to do.